that's the first thing, is just get away with that belief that, or that fear that, oh man, I'm going to lose good candidates because I added automation. The worst thing is, what it really is I'm going to be impersonal through automation.
My name is Katarina, and I'm the Community and Event Manager at eCulture, a company that is on a mission to shape the world of unbiased hiring. Welcome to the Oops, I'm Biased podcast. On today's episode of the Oops, I'm Biased podcast, I am speaking to Stephen Rhyne from ConveYour.com. He is an expert in all things mass recruitment or high volume recruitment, however you want to put it. So hiring lots and lots of people for a specific profile. And he focuses mainly on the connection between recruitment, onboarding, and training. As he puts it, there is a lot of friction between those three, and normally it's three completely separate processes. And for mass recruitment and contractors, it's super important that there is the least friction possible in that process. So we are going to be talking about efficiency in recruitment, especially when it comes to mass recruitment, because that is very different to any permanent contracts recruitment. We're also going to talk about how equitability and inclusion comes into mass recruitment and how important that actually is, instead of building up more obstacles, more hoops to jump through for candidates. And then we also talk a little bit about candidate experience and how he would set up a mass recruitment process in the end. So stick around until then, because he has a lot of stuff to share. I learned a lot, and I'm sure you will too. Without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Stephen Rhyne. Right, welcome everyone. Welcome back if you've been a long-time listener, and welcome to my guest of today, Stephen Rhyne from ConveYour. I'm very excited to be speaking to you today. We have a topic on our hands that we haven't covered at all on our podcast, which is great. I think we're going to be learning a lot, me and also the listeners, hopefully. We're going to talk about mass recruitment, so high volume recruitment and onboarding processes, how we can make those the most efficient, the most productive for everyone, but also potentially the most equitable and inclusive, because that is really important too. Before we go into the nitty-gritty of all of those things that I just mentioned, I would love to throw the word over to you, Stephen, and have you introduce yourself and your connection to recruitment.
Yeah, my name is Stephen Rhyne. I'm the CEO and founder of ConveYour.com. Thank you for saying it the way it's pronounced. And for the last 20 years, I've been working in helping companies that need to build large technician teams or sales teams. I help them recruit, onboard, train, and retain more people. And so we typically work mostly in the States, but have done some European work with European companies. And we typically work in home services industries, and then other sales organizations that sell to for consumer goods.
Yeah. What are the main reasons that companies approach you? Sort of what are they struggling with the most when it comes to hiring?
Yeah, so the main reason they approach us is that if you are in the world of doing mass recruiting, when I say mass recruit, I'm just referring to I have to efficiently build out a new organization in a specific state, or a new. I have to go from 0 reps or 0 technicians to 1,000 in 6 months or 3 months or even a month, and it's just a completely different beast than doing key hires, getting 10 key hires, recruiting for C-suite, or just any long tenured in the States as W-2 employee or permanent employee. And the mindset's totally different. So they actually come to us, I think, when they talk to us, it's about the mindset and the approach that's totally different. And the big approach or difference is that really we approach this whole process as a marketing and sales activity rather than a recruitment activity. So typically, what I've seen is that recruitment is more of an HR motion, HR process. We've got a strategic role we need to fill. We're going to go and I'll just keep it short, but we're going to go put out the requirements. The bar is set high in terms of what those requirements are. Just to even to attract candidates, ideally we wouldn't get 1,000 applications. We'd get 5, and they'd be the perfect people. And so it's the oppositeville in the world of mass recruitment. It's actually much more like a funnel, in the same way you would do sales and marketing for your product, for your SaaS product, for example. You're going to cast a wider net. You're going to do high awareness and low awareness type of content. As a marketer, right? And then you're going to help raise awareness about the opportunity, and then you're going to qualify them and then send them to the right types of sales leaders to close the deal, right? And so that is the way we think about this process, is through a more sales and marketing activity. So,
yeah, it's quite interesting. I don't think we've spoken about recruitment. Well, we've touched on it briefly in other episodes, but not really at length. That yes, in a certain way, you can see recruitment as sort of the sales reps, and then HR sort of the customer service, customer support people for new employees. So I think that comparison makes a lot of sense to look at, especially for mass recruitment or high volume recruitment for roles where you need a lot of people doing the same job. That makes a lot of sense to look at it that way. And that might probably also help recruiters in shifting a bit of their mindset, as you say. So what are they coming then in mainly, and I'm assuming people who are listening to this podcast as well, who are thinking, well, I have these roles, I need a lot of people, say 1,000. Where do I start?
Yeah. And so where we help is actually so we have people coming to us and they say, we're actually doing okay in the process of sourcing. So we don't do sourcing, but there's 2 ways we help there's one way we help in sourcing and another way we don't. So we don't really do sourcing or a typical applicant tracking platform that's pulling, applications from Indeed or some other thing like that. So we really don't help with sourcing. What we help in is getting a great return and a great efficiency, ratio on the sourced recruits. So typically what we've seen is people work really hard to get sourcing, they get them into the funnel. And this is where mass recruiting really starts to fall apart, is they apply an HR recruiting process, a typical HR recruiting process, to a mass recruiting process. And so they're still doing, things like, going through each application's, CV, and then, plucking out the people that look good, which is just not great based off of your thesis on how your product works. And then they're just reaching out to the ones that they have time to reach out to, and then they just don't get to any of the other ones. Okay. And so we flip that around, and we help companies bring as many people possibly as can, position the opportunity the same way to everybody. So you're actually positioning it in the best light you possibly can, not without obviously being truthful, but actually sharing what this opportunity is, could be for them. You're actually signaling to them the types of people you're looking for, and really the companies we work with, they don't care at all about background, which is what I love. They don't care about what school you went to. They don't care about where you're from or anything like that. What they care about is maybe you could exhibit the skill, like your product. You could exhibit the behaviors that we need, or you could exhibit and talk about an example sometime in your life where you demonstrated some kind of level of grit. That's all they really, really care about. And then what they do is they allow people into the fray early if they show interest, and then start qualifying them and checking, if they can demonstrate the behavior after that, once they've showed interest. So it's really about selling them the opportunity first, versus kind of in a typical HR process, you put up a big barrier, and you do want to position your opportunity, but you put a big barrier. It's all about the qualifications. It's all about, this must have this much experience, because you don't want all those applicants, right? Because you're still using that typical HR process. So we help them build out basically like what would be considered a marketing automation workflow, but it's really a recruitment automation workflow. So just to get down to the actual example of how it works, you would get a text message as soon as we have a new application come in. We'd say hello. We give them a private link that they click on. It goes into a landing page that's private to them that we track. It shows them a video. We track how long they've watched the video, and then we nudge them if they haven't watched the video to say, hey, I don't know if you saw that video or not. And then we start to ask them questions like, let's do your due diligence on this opportunity. Is this good for you? And then ask questions like, how much time do you have available? That sort of thing. And it's basically like sales qualification. And then if it makes sense, they can actually schedule an appointment with someone right inside the application, dispatching that to the right, office or region or something like that. And so we just do that all the way through the process, whether that be a first screening or a group interview. Common thing in our industry is a very large mass group interview that somewhat more like a webinar. So where they talk about the role, they show that there's an actual real person on the other end. This is a big win for a lot of companies, is doing that initial mass recruiting kind of learn about the role. A video can't do it all. So there are some people that just want to see the on-demand video and are totally fine with learning about that and then moving forward and potentially getting onboarded or getting a screening. But a lot of people want to see a real person on the other side. So they'll do this they'll sign up for a Zoom interview with a bunch of other people. They track the attendance on that. They nudge them to come back if they didn't make it, right? And so you can see it's very much like a lead gen webinar registration. But in this point, I just love that it's really about anyone that has the desire and anyone that can show that they have, they can do the thing with some behavior testing, like your product. We do some of that too. And then they can demonstrate some level of desire to do the thing that's going to be kind of hard, which is not a regular hourly role or a salaried role, but rather that they're going to have to hunt a little bit. And so that's what I love about I think it's very equitable because it's around that premise rather than around backgrounds or pedigree.
Yeah, because you're really looking for potential. Sort of, do they have the ability? Do they show that behavior of, I can be persistent in that role? I actually want it? Because I think oftentimes it's enough for especially these types of roles to say, as you say, do they have the grit? Do they show behavior that we want to see in that role for them to be successful, instead of turning it around and say, well, do you have previous experience in this work, or do you have previous experience in that field? Not as important as showing if they have the potential to truly do so. I think you spoke to that already, that equitable piece. I think truly important in recruiting for those roles, especially because more likely than not, you're already dealing with a high level of diversity. People coming in from all different walks of life, needing a next job opportunity, maybe wanting a bit of a different or atypical role, or maybe not being successful in other roles. So then you'd already have that high diversity level in your applicants. So then making sure that your process is the same for everyone. And then also lowering those barriers of, do you have XYZ on your CV, is really, making it a lot more equitable and a lot more inclusive from that stance. So really interesting how you're turning it around and sort of from a metaphor of a sales process, looking at it and saying, well, we need to sell that first, and then hope that they will get to the onboarding stage.
Yeah. And where we, just to go a little bit further, I think that even if you nail that part of the recruiting process as a mass recruiter, the next two bits actually are what slow you down even more in recruiting. And we call it back pressure. it's a technical, developer term, but back pressure in a system is basically you can't have throughput because you have other things forcing you to slow down. And the managers, middle management doesn't want to grow into the pain of having more people to deal with. And so you'll start getting pushback on mass recruiting. So it really builds your ability to push into having more. It's the same way with sales and marketing. If you don't have a good customer success team or onboarding team, you're gonna fall down. you're gonna have to slow down. And so what I see a lot of companies that don't figure this out, I call it kind of like the base camp model. So they're trying to climb Mount Everest, and at some point they have to just stop at a base camp and just kind of recuperate a little bit before they can move forward. And depending on your seasonality, you might miss a season if you're doing a seasonal business. And so what we do is we think about you have to blur the lines between the process of recruiting, onboarding, and training. Just blur it all together and create an experience that feels like one cohesive experience for the candidate. So what happens typically when a company scales, and the companies that need to get more people, is they completely departmentalize recruiting, and then they do HR and onboarding separate, and then training is separate. Now they're getting more efficient with their aspect of the business. All right. But to the customer experience, aka rep experience, it's worse. So it's a typical try to go talk to Salesforce right now, or just get a question answered just on the website versus going to a smaller SaaS company or something. So what we do is we put all of that experience, the recruiting blends right into the onboarding, blends right into the training, and so we put it into a concierge portal, whatever system you're using. It's not about our system. It's just about thinking about it as a holistic experience for the candidate, because the big difference between mass recruiting versus W-2 is you are full-time. In full-time, once they get an offer letter, there's still some built-in cohesiveness around that, which is, I took the offer. I'll let this onboarding take some time. I don't know if they have it all together here on their onboarding process or their training process, but that's okay. But with mass recruiting, typically, if it's an independent contractor, they have every right to go look at another opportunity at the same time when they're going through your onboarding process. So they will silently quit. They will silently ghost out of your funnel, okay, and go look at other opportunities. So you might think you have this funnel, but when it comes to actually getting them on the door to knock or make the phone call or whatever, they're not fully bought in. And so the recruiting process, just maybe this is obvious. I don't know if it's obvious to you, but in mass recruiting, this is a common problem, is that they think they've done the recruiting process, but it's actually right after that point of the offer where the recruiting begins. And so this is a perfect example that I'd like to share around a tier one manufacturer, parts manufacturer for a car company. They made parts for cars. And they would have people, they would give an offer to entry-level factory line workers, and they would quit 2 days in. They had a very high attrition rate at second day. And on the exit interview is, I'm sore from working the line. And I was just really stressed out about feeling slow on the line my first day. So what we did is we put together a campaign that the right after the offer sends them these little belief building videos, these little micro learning lessons, that it was the learning manager going around and saying, "Hey, tell me about your first day." "Oh, well, I was really sore the first day, and I was pretty stressed out that everybody was mad at me about how slow I was on the line. But actually, they weren't. It was just me, and I got over the soreness by the third day, and you'll be fine." And so they started putting that. So it's a belief building exercise right after the fact. And so that's what I think people have to realize about mass recruiting, is that it again is just, it's really more. This is what I like to ask people. If you built enough belief, by the time you got to training, they would go on YouTube to learn about your industry. If you built enough belief and got them that excited, the training is half just buy-in before doing the training. Okay, so that's what I mean by the blurring the funnel.
Yeah. It's really I think a lot of companies, I think, that hire in that way, and you spoke about manufacturing already now. We see that as well with clients of ours who are in the manufacturing industry, whether that's now food or, as you say, cars. They struggle a lot with attrition. In the first year, 40% will just drop off because they won't complete the training, they won't complete onboarding. I think what you just spoke to, as much as it is about efficiency, it's probably also about understanding your workforce, sort of being that data driven and sort of figuring out, okay, as you say in that exit interview, why are you leaving us already? And then what can we do about that? I think that is a, sort of an excellent example of then such a small thing like a video or sort of smaller learning points, bringing in, after the offer is made, bringing that in to basically minimize the amount of people who would quit on the second day, which is so early. And I think that's a great learning lesson for recruiters who are listening right now. When you've made the offer and they've accepted it, your job's probably not done. If you're doing it well, you should probably keep going and work really, really closely with colleagues from other teams. As you say, it can be sort of a bit splintered off into different teams, especially with HR and onboarding, and then L&D later on as well. That it's so important to see the process as a whole. I think we also do that quite well at eCulture, where we focus on, yes, we're testing your cognitive abilities. Yes, we're testing for potential, but we're also making sure that you as the candidate can learn from learn what your strengths are and then focus on your weaknesses as you go through onboarding in the role, sort of figuring out, okay, what can I get better at, using that again. So I think what you just mentioned is an excellent example of how can we make sure that we see it as a whole process up until the person leaves us again. Because the end of their contract or they found something else, instead of just focusing on those little moments of, okay, we've got the yes, now we ship them off to the next system where they have to log in and onboard and do 5 steps, and then we ship them off to the next system, right?
Yeah, and I love the example of what you're talking about with eCulture, where identifying your strengths and weaknesses, that's a value that you're giving to the candidate, and then being able to use that as a way to actually retain them. Because if you put a program around the growth of their weaknesses, if you use that as something, hey, let's talk about that in our next check-in, then they look forward to that. They look forward to the growth. So I just love that anchor of creating that profile and then using that as a way to pull them through the process.
Yeah. I guess just different ways of sort of applying that. And I think what we can take away already from this conversation so far that we've been having is look at where the bottlenecks are in your hiring and onboarding process. Look at sort of where you get stuck in that base camp, as you mentioned. I think that's great metaphor.
I think there's an oppressive nature of getting those numbers sometimes. I think it's either one of those things where it's very complicated to put together. Okay, what was actually from this step to this step to this step to this step? And I just suggest pull out a product like Whimsical or Lucid Chart or something, and just try to map your journey. Just map all of the pieces, because as you do it with your team, you'll notice right here, between here and like, I don't actually know what happens here. What email do we send? What does it say? What text do we send right here? And as you do it, just the process of trying to put it all on paper and put it in the whole experience for a candidate, you start to see all the spots where you need to, like a dark room where you need to shine a light in the corner and say, what happens over here? Because that's where you lose people, are in those dark spots of the process.
Yeah, and especially in mass recruiting, as you say, candidate experience is probably the most important of any other type of recruiting, to make sure that you're getting your touch points right. Probably the most important thing. Maybe I'm getting it wrong. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, it definitely is the copy in your messages. It's the nudging, following up efficiently. I think one thing that we've kind of gotten over, a hurdle that sometimes is, if I introduce a lot of automation into my process, then I will take all of the personal experience out of the recruiting process, and it will hurt my recruiting process. And that's just dead wrong. I promise it's dead wrong. And I argue, I don't know what the relationship is with EU and Amazon. Okay, but Americans, we just love our Amazon, and we're just buying everything on Amazon. But I don't actually have to ever go to Amazon support. It just works. And we took one company, they were spending, not joking, 4 hours a day on their own mobile phones, texting candidates, mass recruiting, 4 hours a day. And I think that at least just for one recruiter, we save them about 20 hours a week. They buy back all their time to just automate those reminders, automate the text messages to the manager saying this person's going to show up to do an interview tomorrow, all of that. And what it does is it brings back all that extra time to have deep conversations with a candidate that has some questions. You get all your time back to actually build more relationships. I don't think you build a relationship on your interview is tomorrow at 1 p.m. Text message. That's not going to be very relationship building. And I don't think you should spend your time there. Just like elevate, your time. So that's the first thing, is just get away with that belief or that fear that, oh man, I'm going to lose good candidates because I added automation. The worst thing is, what it really is I'm going to be impersonal through automation. And that means that if somebody replied back, I have to reschedule, you get no response, or you get a bot that responds back and says, I don't know what you need, or something like that. When really you separate the difference between the value of automation and being impersonal. You can still be personal and have automation.
Yeah. That's I'm so glad you brought that up. It wasn't actually in my questions, but I'm so happy that you're touching on this, because talking to a lot of people in the industry, yes, that is a bit of a belief, because recruitment's always sort of tagging on to HR, and HR is all about people, and we need sort of the human touch in this, and everything needs to be sort of either on the one camp is sort of, we need to curate everything, and we need to make sure that everyone feels special in the way that they're treated, or the other way around, being like, well, we don't have any time for anything, let's just automate all of it. Sort of any tech tool that we can find, if we can use AI, let's chuck it in there. Which I think neither of them are right. As you say, you can actually humanize and personalize a candidate experience, or that employee journey from the beginning through touch points that are curated.
And where the impersonal nature comes from is a reactive problem solving rather than mapping out the journey. Once you map out the journey, you see where you can say a personal, you can put their first name in there. You can say exactly when they need to show up. You can put the office manager information in there. You can exquisitely communicate in your process, but you're where people kind of back up, pump the brakes on automation, is when they just throw something onto a process when they didn't actually understand the whole journey. But yes, we butt heads with HR a little bit sometimes when someone who came from a role of just hiring permanent, and they're hiring 10 to 15 people in a quarter, and it's just a different mindset. You have to let go of some of the I'm going to be able to call every single person, and I actually honestly think that is where you lose that's where a lot of bias shows up. Because if you do not have a really efficient system to allow everybody to go through this process, then you're going to fall down. You're going to fall back to looking at, scanning through CVs, finding one that looks good, and making a call. And so that is by definition using the most bias. I think it's just one recruiter's decision on which CVs to call.
Exactly. And they have a completely, subjective way of deciding, is this person fit for the role? Do they have potential? This is very loosely tied to what they're looking for. It's very much subjective to their own experience, maybe even how they feel on the day.
Absolutely.
Who looks nice, I don't know, who looks similar to them, those sorts of things, or who's gone to the same school or done the same, or you name it, anything they can sort of resonate with in the profile that'll derail it completely, as you say. Yeah. No, very interesting.
Yeah. Also, I was going to say that the managers, it's also the lower level the managers of those recruits push back on the recruiters all the time, right? So they're constantly saying, well, look for people that have these characteristics. Look for the people that have those characteristics. And then the recruiters are getting pushed around to different directions all the time. And that's got to be stressful for them. So my heart goes out to recruiters. This is a great way to stave off that energy. Is just, hey, we have a process that's very thorough. That's going to let people go through, and you're going to get a wide spectrum of backgrounds. But what you're going to get are people that are willing to do the thing. That's the most important thing. Willing to do the thing and are excited to do the thing.
Yeah, exactly. And by that point, that they hopefully start also informed enough that they know what they're getting themselves into and not canceling or sort of dropping off the second day because because they don't feel equipped to do it, or feel that they're not good enough for it.
Yeah,
I think that's a great add-on. My last question, we've already gotten to the end, which time's flown by for me. Can you share some advice with recruiters? I know we talked a lot about different aspects now of how to pull all of these things together into a process. Can you give some advice to recruiters who are in front of that challenge and don't really know where to start, sort of a 1, 2, 3 step that they can maybe already start implementing tomorrow that won't cost them anything?
For mass recruiting? Mass recruiting?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll break down what the basic steps that I think is a good mass recruiting process. And it could be on any marketing automation tool with a landing page tool, or it could be on our product or whatever. So first, have a great I'll go quickly through this, okay? But have a great introductory text, okay? Text or email that makes it all about them. Thanks them for their interest, really quickly explains the next steps, and that link usually takes them to a video that you're driving towards. Everything is around, in marketing automations, everything's around the next conversion. So that's what I want people to understand, is it's around the next conversion. So your copy there, all it needs to do is the conversion to the next thing. And the next thing, marketing, right? Marketing 101. And so the conversion is to get the email, get the click, and the click goes to a video. The video explains the opportunity. It's very clear on the expectations. It's not hand wavy. It explains what the opportunity is. It positions opportunity-based pay really well. And it really does signal to the person that you're trying to look for. And this is, again, for any recruiter, but I'm specifically talking about mass recruiting in a contractor context. But in that video, you're really trying to kind of do a Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader situation, right? It's us versus them a little bit. Like, hey, do you want to work a salary role, or would you like to earn what you're worth? And then you show the team, you show them doing great things. You show them behind the curtain what this looks like. And then you say, what we're looking for is this. What we're looking for are people that are that can show grit. This is the typical type of video. If you want to learn more, go to the next thing. Now, the next thing is you do a little bit. This is where you do your qualification and a little bit of your behavior. Just like, do you have transportation, or do you have? Do you understand that? Just short, keep this short. But do you understand that while this is not a permanent role, most people that are successful in this role spend maybe this many hours, right? Just at super, super basic expectations, which would then take them to schedule. And then you have a tool like Cal.com or Calendly to schedule them on a calendar. And then through this whole process, you're nudging them through the funnel. So if they didn't watch the video, you might remind them. If they didn't finish the questions, you might remind them. And then you get them scheduled. You set up a process for that to be a Zoom interview or a mass, Google Meet or something like that. You track attendance. People that miss, you remind them, get them back on the next one. People that you keep, this is a nice little hack. This is very efficient. Hey, either scan this, if you want to move forward, either scan this QR code from your phone right off of the webinar, or we will just send you the next step. And if you want to move forward, you do that. That's way easier than doing any follow-up to say if you want to keep each individual person. And then the ones that you want to keep anyway, whether they scan the QR code or not, you just move them to kept and then go to the next step, which is you invite them to do an office interview. You do the office interview, you do the reminders, you do the kept. You make it super efficient for a manager in an office to say yes to that person. This is really key. Otherwise, you get a ton of inefficiency right there, talking to managers. Who do you want to keep? Who do you not want to keep? That sort of thing. And then from there, then you send the offer. And from the offer, you go right into onboarding. So that's the typical flow. It's probably simple, but it's in the devil's in the details and the execution of that.
Yeah, I think the simpler, the better, just because with mass recruitment, you deal with so many steps where people can drop off. Mm-hmm. Any additional step that you put in that might not make sense or might be too lengthy will drop you down.
That's right.
I don't know, tens of people that might not get through that additional step.
Yeah. And so by having a really good plan around your flow, at any point when you feel like, oh, we have too much friction in this funnel, you can take a step out. If you need to add friction, you can add it. But if you don't have it already written out, it's very difficult. You're just reacting, right? Rather than putting it, oh, well, let's put a patch right here. So
yeah, exactly. And then maybe also a good tip from you now to say, well, look at your own recruitment process at the moment. What is it now? As you say, sort of do a chart. What's the flow chart look like? Where are we? How many steps are there, and what can we potentially take out? Where do we have the drop off? So be really analytical in that step.
Yeah, and a tip on that too, just if you're going to whiteboard it, just put the things on a Post-it note. Don't try to connect them, or either whimsical or something like that. Just put the thing. Office interview, Zoom interview, offer letter. Just all of these things. Just throw them up as things, and then arrange them.
Yeah,
I find that arrange in the order. That's just a lot easier. Do the ideation first, and then try to structure how it actually plays out.
Yeah, that's such a great piece of advice. I would love to end it there. I know that we could have spoken for so much longer, and I think there is so much more for you to share. Maybe we'll have you on in the future if you say yes, which I would love. But thank you so much, Stephen, for coming on this episode and walking us through everything mass recruitment, everything efficiency, and making sure that your flow flows. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope that you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did very much enjoy it. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. And maybe we'll hear some more of you on this podcast. And if not, please go follow Stephen. I know that you're quite active on LinkedIn. And also check out ConveYour if you want to learn more about what these guys are doing. I know they do amazing things there. For everyone who listened today, thank you so much for tuning in again. Don't forget to check in with us in 2 weeks' time. We are a bi-weekly podcast, so come back for a new episode then. And until then, thank you so much for tuning in. Goodbye.